All right, the spooky season is coming upon us. October is already here. Late September, you go into the stores and they're already selling Halloween candy and masks and so forth. So I like to talk about spooky stuff. I am a ghost story aficionado. I love ghost stories. I love creepy stories. I don't like gory horror stories. I don't like things watching people get tortured. I don't like to get my thrills that way. But I do love the kind of creepy, that horror that you get out of the side of your eyes, you get out of the corner of your eyes, you see it and you turn around and it's gone. I love that stuff. But one of the things I want to talk about is I want to talk about 60s and 70s horror from a very specific point of view, a point of view that I covered in my book, The Truth and Beauty. The Truth and Beauty is about the Romantics and what they have to say about the Gospels, or how they can kind of refresh our view of the Gospels. And one of the writers I cover is Mary Shelley, who wrote in 18 or 19, she wrote the novel Frankenstein, which basically invented the science fiction genre, the modern science fiction genre as we know it. There are some documents that came out before that, but she was really the creator of science fiction. And Frankenstein, I point out in The Truth and Beauty, is not, as Mary Shelley said it was, it's not really about a man who usurps God by creating life himself. It's about a man who usurps the role of women in creating a man without a mother. And what the monster comes and demands of him is that he creates a wife for him, which he simply cannot do. He simply cannot bring women into this role because he has taken the place of women. And I point out in the book that this theme of women being erased becomes one of the main themes of science fiction. I point out, for instance, in The Terminator, that they come to kill the mother of the rebel leader, and that her whole personality in the first great Terminator movie, before all the sequels, is that she's a girl. That's her thing. She's just a sweet girl who does girly things, and that's her superpower. And it is her superpower. But I point out that as these movies develop, these kind of anti-female movies like The Matrix comes from a word meaning womb, but now the role of women has been taken over by machines, which is kind of what Mary Shelley was predicting. But in between Mary Shelley and pictures like The Matrix, in between the time when we watched movies to remind us of our values. But when I grew up, I watched World War II movies and Westerns and movies, monster movies that kind of related to the past, like The Mummy and Dracula. They're related to monsters who came out of history. In between that and the technological world that then came upon us, after the technological world, movies kind of related to the future. Superhero movies show us kind of transhumanism, and pictures like The Matrix show us a machine world, a world run by AI. In that transition from natural movies to technological movies, from a natural way of life that harkened back to tradition to a technological way of life that harkened forward, a lot of the horror movies that came out in that period were about the horror of women's bodies. It really is odd how many of them, if you take The Exorcist, if you look at this, it's about a girl who gets to be at the age when women generally mature, when girls generally mature, when they start to have their periods, and she's possessed by a demon, and she becomes highly sexualized. Her language becomes filthy.
You worthless.
And you can just look at that movie as being a metaphor for your daughter becoming a woman, becoming a teenage girl. And it's like she's suddenly gone crazy. She's suddenly sexualized. She's suddenly doing things you don't understand. The Exorcist is, I think, it is about demon possession, but it is also a metaphor for a girl coming of age. That's true, too, of Carrie, obviously, the Stephen King book and then movie, where it starts with a girl having her period and then ends with her bathed in blood because her period has given her telekinetic powers. And, of course, a woman coming into womanhood does develop powers of telekinesis. There are things that, not to give you too much information, but the things she can make move just by appearing. And she then has a power that has nothing to do with the strength, the physical strength of men. She has a power that is almost traveling between one place and another place without any kind of medium to go on. And so Carrie is about the horror version of that. You have movies like Rosemary's Baby and The Omen, where Satan takes a hand in childbirth. In Rosemary's Baby, obviously Satan essentially rapes a woman, and then she has to bring to term the son of the devil. That's why she's Rosemary. She's not Mary. She is the opposite of that. And in The Omen, the devil replaces a child with a child of his own. And all of these films that represent a horror of the female body, because the female body binds us to our humanity. They are the opposite of the Virgin Mary. They're the opposite of the woman who brings God into the world through her ability to give birth, who brings life into the world, not just through her ability to give birth, but also through her ability to communicate individuality to a baby. This is something that science has shown, that the poet Wordsworth Guest understood before science knew it, was that in the interaction between a mother and her newborn child, that's where the child draws its humanity. That's where it becomes a full person engaged with life. It's really interesting that this motion between naturalistic films that harken back to the past and technological films that imagine the future in this epoch of the 60s and 70s, the horror movies often relate to the horror of a woman's body, and those movies are bookended by two very famous, I think they're not both Oscar winning, but they're both classic films that bookend this period of horror at a woman's body. One is Psycho, and the other is Silence of the Lambs. And both of them are based on the murders of a guy named Ed Gein, who killed women and also robbed women's bodies from graves, cut the bodies up and used them as a costume, where he would dress up in their bodies as a woman. And that inspired both the film Psycho, which is about a transgender killer who pretends to be his mother, and Silence of the Lambs, which is also about a transgender killer, Buffalo Bill. It's this moment when there is an understanding that gender itself is in the way of the future, that there's something scary about gender, that there's something fleshy and real and disturbing about childbirth and menarche and, just the changes that people go through and the power women have that has nothing to do with worldly power. Where does it come from? What's it all about? It's a really interesting moment in horror, and I think I would be surprised if you don't see more of it as we enter this period. The only thing now is that they have to prevent transgenderism from seeming to be what I think it is, which is a disturbance. It's a mental and spiritual disturbance, because now they're trying to sell it to us because they realize that the future they want, that technological future, depends on women being separated from their womanhood, separated from their femininity, separated from their bodies, separated from the role they play both in bringing life into the world and by bringing humanity into people. One of the most important moments of my life, a moment that I discuss in my memoir, The Great Good Thing, it was the birth of my daughter, which I witnessed, and which gave me the only really mystical experience I ever had, where I experienced the sea of love that connects matter to life. In that moment, if you've ever seen a child be born, it's a tremendously material thing. You see urine, feces, blood, water, all these things pouring out of the woman you love, and then in the midst of this mess, you see a child, an amazing thing, a child. There's an infinite distance between matter and life, between inanimate matter and life, and in that distance lies the whole mystery of being human, and in that mystery of being human lies both the joy and wonder of life, but also the fearful horror of life that extends somehow beyond this material world into something we simply don't know or understand. That's what horror speaks of in its worst way, and that's what religion speaks of in the best way. Really, really interesting thing to watch the roles that women play in horror movies. If you were wise enough to understand how great that was, you want to like and subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to the Andrew Klavan Podcast.